This is lecture 131D in the ABCs of Communism series of lectures which accompany the volumes in this book, and this in particular is in support of volume 8 on communism in North America prior to the time of white contact. And I think that since I've got the time that we will also include the initial phases of white contact, which were of course so destructive for the peoples of North America. At any rate, our subject is the advanced theocratic chiefdoms in eastern North America from Hopewell to Cahokia. So first of all, you want to remember that the stage of advanced theocratic chiefdoms should begin like this. An advancing simple chiefdom is a society about to be torn apart by antagonistic special interest groups. For chiefdom society to survive, it is essential that the professional specialist groups and the ranks, high and low, be unified behind the leadership. In all cases of autochthonous sociocultural evolution to the slave stage, a unifying religion accomplishes this task everywhere on the planet. It necessarily precedes state formation in that the state, that is the army and police, has not yet emerged. Now, there's a changing general contradiction and consequently a changing prime directive. Instead of avoiding the enemy within, which is jealousy, envy, coveting, by evading surplus production, one is now saying maximize surplus product production, because with honest central collection and efficient one-woman administration, we will all still be equal. However, on this course, and in a few more steps and centuries, the maximizing of surplus production will occur far beyond necessary amounts. Why? Because A, society has been, 1, dividing into special interest groups via professional specialization, which constitute de facto ranks of differing access to both the articles of production and the means of production. Now, these ranks are the necessary result of the simple fact that with the professional specialization of individual concrete labor, some professions are economically and politically better off than others. And 2, simultaneously, non-egalitarian ideology has firmly taken root. B, the effect has been that the higher ranks of society, now selfishly motivated, want to maximize production to take more as profit for themselves. The general contradiction of the servitude epoch is on the horizon. The new and coming general contradiction would have been camouflaged by all the talk about how what we call a general crisis can be more efficiently handled. The archaeological record is universally in line with this interpretation. Everywhere, without exception, where we have a continuous sequence of sociocultural evolution in the ground, we see the transition from tribal agriculture to simple chiefdoms happened exactly this way. That is to say, in China, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, Peru, the U.S. Southwest, and the U.S. Eastern Woodlands. Now, efficiency in a tribal agricultural setting is further enhanced, some would have said, by getting rid of the tribal council and all that democratic rot in favor of military discipline and organization of the various productive tasks that come with the professional specialization of labor. So one of the various productive tasks, so one chief is elected, and although she may have consigliere from the clans, it is a revolution in social organization tending towards centralization and concentration of social authority as well as surplus. The small group at the center will have within it that one who advocated or will advocate this change for the ulterior motives of greed and self-advancement, regardless of the effect on the community as a whole. Not that the immediate effect will have been bad, it probably will have been excellent, but to the person with the hidden agenda, this is altogether a matter of fortune. He or she can turn to their advantage in selling the new way. This soldier of fortune's concern is with herself, not them, and being in the center of the reciprocal movement of goods and services means you can pull some of it from the cash flow as you will to do with as you wish. The farther one goes down the road of efficiency via professional specialization of labor, the further one has traveled along the road of social revolution. The chief collects the surpluses and assigns different persons to new tasks, such as full-time irrigation and dam building, full-time pottery and textile production for the new rank of irrigation and dam builders, the more labor time that is actually specialized. Truly commoditized now, as numbers of people are assigned to specific tasks where their labor time is socially necessary and abstracted, the better the results in the production of both value and surplus social product, including proto-surplus value. The chief and her family, her helpers and cohorts from the clans, now constitute a special rank themselves, as do the farming families, the professional specialist families, and the priests and priestesses who convince the rubes that all this is divinely inspired. A society of ranks has replaced the society of equals. That is to say, tribes and simple chiefdoms where democratic inclinations were more powerful moved into areas where they could stay with the old ways, where the rubes could slash and burn to their heart's content and live happily ever after, such as the vast steppe lands of the Soviet West and Central Asia and Eastern Europe, and so on and so on. But we also have these ranks with special interests in North America. We looked already at the advanced theocratic chiefdom stage in the Southwest, and now we're going to take a closer look at it in the Eastern Woodlands, where we actually have a movement into the slave stage. Now, it is inevitable that these ranks will become antagonistic, if for no other reason than vagaries of primitive agriculture and animal husbandry. Now, the exigencies of tribal agricultural Stone Age economics may create a severe shortage of surplus, leaving the central granaries depleted. Such exigencies are hail, rain, flooding, drought, locusts, disease, war, or raiding. Who is going to get the shit end of the stick when the chief's warehouse is approaching bankruptcy? When the granaries are full, which groups, if any, stand to benefit more? Now, from the simple chiefdom stage, we have movement to the advanced theocratic chiefdom stage, coming from the growing need for professional specialization of labor on the one hand, and on the other hand, the concomitant need to offset the tendency towards social disillusion is the new stage general crisis. This is implicit in any society split between different special interest groups with inherently different interests. One must either stop fragmenting society and return to the simpler tribal agricultural way of life, or find some way to offset the dissolution effects arising from the fractioning of society into groups of relatively discontented people. The resolution of this crisis always comes in the form of a unifying religion. For supernaturally steeped people, religion can do the job, for there is nothing else. No state apparatus, army and police, yet exists, so it is impossible to forcefully compel obedience of one rank to another, or even of one special craft guild to the center. In other words, before there was coercion, there was persuasion, because there had to be persuasion in the absence of the state, which is armed thuggery. Now, persuasion was the only way to ensure social unity and cohesion. The archaeological evidence is clear in this regard. Religions emerged which persuaded people to give over more authority to the chief in all. With that authority to allocate their abstracted labor time, corvée labor drafts, annual labor time voluntarism, and to adjust the amount of produce to be kept in the individual family farming household per head, as the leadership wished, a Rubicon had been crossed. These religions allowed the privileged ranks to take more of the surplus social product being created at the family farm or village commune to the center, that is, to themselves. In fact, they require that more be taken to the church, and of course its practitioners, and more of the abstracted socially necessary labor time goes to the center, too, even before it becomes surplus social product, which can also be thought of as proto-surplus value. Now, in shorthand terms, for convenience of rapid calculation when reading archaeological sequences, you can think of this religious stage as lasting in each and every case roughly 1,000 years. Now, the ranking of society will become acute in these advanced theocratic chiefdoms, or ATCs. When it does, the separation of the specialist crafts and guilds is the basic diagnostic feature of their social organization. The selfish and sadistic imprinting of infants and children proceeds apace, as it must, since it is sadistic relations which for the first time are everywhere at hand, and thus what all infants and children must see as they mature. This is the second diagnostic feature of the ATC stage. We know this from the archaeological and historical records. Everywhere abstracted, homogenized, socially necessary labor time is emerging, which is to say the new economic category of proto-labor power. From now on, it will be this proto-labor power which is the principal form of human labor setting the standard for our formula. Not that concrete human individual laboring activity ceases, far from it, but it is the new category of labor power as applied to technology, which sets the pace, acting as the common denominator for the payment of value one, even to those who are not part of the category of collectively applied, temporally measured group labor. From this point forward in history, what is obtainable by the individual will be measured by what the collective labor of corvées, or forced labor, is paid in food and shelter. In other words, the cost of the minimal subsistence of slaves, convicts, or captured peoples. However, the seeds of the destruction of this order are also very much in place. Religion has temporarily solved the problem of labor discipline by obtaining voluntary compliance with the theocrat's production plan. However, the production of social product is now a definite necessity. To assure its production, the practitioners of religion have cut a special place for themselves. They are a new social rank, exacerbating the increasingly complex division of social production. No matter how this increasingly acute struggle over social produce is resolved, the poorest people get the shit end of the stick. Now let us look at how our formula says that the surplus column is subdivided. So on the left side of the arrow we have labor power applied to technology. Then the arrow, and that gives us value 1, value 2, plus surplus, social surplus. And the subcolumns are storage, support, profit, and theocrats. And then in your text I will give another definition for each one of these terms so you don't have to flip back and forth to the preceding chapters, or volumes for that matter. And this is the locus of the general crisis of the stage of advanced theocratic chiefdoms. That is, on the one hand, society must have the theocrats to stay together. On the other hand, the priests are also simultaneously exacerbating the inherently unjust nature of a society in the process of dividing against itself. The institutionalized inequality between the haves and have-nots reaches the breaking point. The theocrats are contributing to this splitting of society by helping themselves to the maximum. When a crisis arises that puts too many people between a rock and a hard place, and the resolution attempted by the center is blatantly unfair, Ma and Pa Kettle will gather round with their fellow rubes and revolt. Then either they will tear society apart in a rank war, or some will flee to begin life again in a simpler way, in lands far from the home region, or a new solution will appear to the civil conflict. What can that be? And the answer is the state. The origin of the state, then. The state is the army and police in the pay of the richest families. It exists to compel obedience from the poor families. That is what the state means in scientific terms, and should not be confused with government, which existed before the state and which will exist after the state withers away. The archaeological record is replete with proof of this eventual end to advanced theocratic society in the USA eastern woodlands. Yes, there is, but it involves the emergence of armed force in the very private pay of a few financially powerful families and or ranks of the old theocratic chiefdoms. Where that happens, which is to say where the state emerges, then true class society has also emerged. Ranks have been transmuted into classes, and the ruling classes will dominate the rest of society. The socio-cultural evolutionary point has been reached in eastern North America just before white contact. In case of eastern North America, we have seen that people evolved on a sociocultural evolutionary track from hunting and gathering, archaic, to tribal agriculture, and then the simple chiefdoms of the Adena. Now we shall see the advent of the next sociocultural evolutionary stage of advanced theocratic chiefdoms that came to a rather abrupt end in rank wars. From these there emerged the first of the slave stage kingdoms, among them that of the people named for the Cahokia tribe, a historic Illinois people at the time of white contact. Hopewell to Cahokia. The Hopewell advanced theocratic chiefdom flourished along rivers in the northeastern and midwestern United States from 100 BC to AD 500 in the Middle Woodlands period. Now there were a number of these ATCs, in case that wasn't clear, in that period. Hopewell populations originated in western New York, and then some moved south into Ohio, where they merged with the local Adena simple chiefdoms. In time, the religion of the Hopewell ATC spread to all the sub-areas of the eastern woodlands, where people lived near rivers in temporary settlements of 1 to 3 households and practiced a mixture of hunting, gathering, and crop growing. The Hopewell advanced theocratic chiefdom inherited from its Adena simple chiefdoms an incipient social stratification. This social stratification professionally specialized the exploitation of natural resources and encouraged population growth. Hopewell societies cremated most of their deceased, reserving burial for the most important ranks. The emergence of these theocrats was the essential step to highly stratified socio-political organization. Their settlements featured extensive and complex trading routes that doubled as communication networks and assembling people together for important ceremonies. Today, the best surviving features of the Hopewell tradition are the great geometric earthworks mound monuments. These eastern woodlands mounds have various geometric shapes rising to great heights. Some gigantic sculpted earthworks took the shape of animals, birds, and serpents. Now, a few comments on the superstructure or the ideology that changed in society from Hopewell to Cahokia. Several scientists hypothesized that the Octagon Earthwork at Newark, Ohio, was a lunar observatory oriented to the 18.6 year cycle of minimum and maximum lunar risings and settings on the local horizon. The Octagon covers more than 50 acres, the size of 100 football fields. An unpublished survey in 1978 proposed a lunar major alignment for the Octagon. The Newark Earthworks and the High Banks Works in Chillicothe, Ohio are representative. The Fairground Circle in Newark, Ohio, aligns to the sunrise on May 4th, marking the May cross-quarter sunrise. The Hopeton, Ohio Earthworks encode various sunrise and moonrise patterns, including the winter and summer solstices, the equinoxes, the cross-quarter days, the lunar maximum events, and the lunar minimum events due to their precise straight and parallel lines. Some mounds contain various types of burials. Precious burial goods have been found in them, and these include objects of adornment made of copper, mica, and obsidian imported to the region from hundreds of miles away. Stone and ceramics were fashioned into intricate shapes. The Hopewell created fine craftwork and artwork. Most of this work had some ATC religious significance, and their graves were filled with necklaces, ornate carvings made from bone or wood, decorated ceremonial pottery, earplugs, and pendants. Some graves were lined with woven mats, thin mica sheets, or stones. The Hopewell produced artwork in a greater variety and with more exotic materials than their predecessors, the Adena. Grizzly bear teeth, freshwater pearls, seashells, shark's teeth, copper, and even small quantities of silver were turned into beautifully crafted pieces. The Hopewell artisans were expert carvers of pipestone, and many of the mortuary mounds are full of exquisitely carved statues and pipes. The Mound of Pipes at Mound City produced over 200 stone smoking pipes depicting animals and birds in three-dimensional form, and the Tremper site in Scioto County produced over 130. Some artwork went beyond stone as Hopewell artists were expert carvers of human bone. A rare mask was created using a human skull as a faceplate. Hopewell artists created both abstract and realistic portrayals of the human form. One tubular pipe was identified as an achondroplastic dwarf. Many other figurines give details of dress, ornamentation, and hairstyles. An example is the mica hand from the Hopewell site in Ross County, Ohio, delicately cut from a piece of mica more than 11 inches long and 6 inches wide. The handpiece was likely worn or carried for public viewing. Cahokia artisans produced religious long-nosed god maskettes, ceremonial earrings with a symbolic shape used in kinship rituals. Mississippian copper plates such as the Wolfing cache from southeastern Missouri, some of the Etowah plates from Georgia, and many of the Spiro plates from Oklahoma were made in Cahokia in the AD 1200s. Now, rank war. Around AD 500, the Hopewell ATC period ended in an internal war between ranks. Archaeologically, this is marked by the cessation of monumental architecture construction. The next half millennia featured an ongoing struggle between the ruling ranks that have become classes and the lower ranks that feature slaves as well as the poor farming families. Then a few slave stage polities emerged. One of them is named after a Native American tribe encountered at white contact named the Cahokia. The Cahokia was a Native American city from AD 1050 to AD 1350. It was located directly across the Mississippi River from modern St. Louis, Missouri. The Cahokia Historic Park lies in southern Illinois between East St. Louis and Collinsville. The park covers 2,200 acres and contains 80 structural remnants, but the ancient city covered 6 square miles and included about 120 man-made earthworks built in a wide range of sizes, shapes, and functions. Cahokia was the largest urban settlement of the Mississippian culture. These primitive slave-based polities occur in the central and southeastern United States. As we have seen, they evolved from the ATC stage in this geographical expanse. Cahokia itself is the largest urban complex north of Tolan, Teotihuacan, and Tenochtitlan. Cahokia's beginning was about AD 600, during the late Woodland period. By the AD 800s, its people left pottery, shell, copper, wood, and stone artifacts, some with symbolic notations. Cahokia is the most important urban concentration yet identified for the people of the Mississippian culture. Their settlements ranged across the Midwest, eastern, and southeastern United States. Now, a few comments on the mode of production, beginning with its technology. At its maximum, Cahokia agriculture relied upon maize, beans, and squash. This was at the same time as in the Southwest that the Chaco Canyon Society produced large-scale works in an ATC socially stratified society. That was the highest level achieved by them, but in the eastern woodlands, sociocultural evolution went beyond the ATC level. Mississippian technological innovations mirror the revolutionary changes in subsistence economy, works of art, and a more tightly organized and hierarchical society. Cahokians advanced one step further and were in the slave stage at the time of their maximum. Mississippian farmers used hoes fashioned from a fine-grained chert from southern Illinois quarries called the Mill Creek chert. The numerous hoe fragments and small blunt and highly polished discarded hoes bear testament to the quality of this chert from working Mississippian fields. The most important Mississippian farming implement was the chert hoe. Now, Mill Creek chert was used in the production of hoes. Naturally, hoes were in high demand as a tool for Cahokia farmers and other Mississippian towns. Cahokia's manufacture and distribution of these chert hoes was a mainstay of the economy. Now, the Mississippian people developed very standardized styles for arrow points. The bow and arrow technology had been developed toward the end of the woodland period. Mississippian ceramics of jars, bowls, bottles, and plates were both visually appealing as well as technologically sophisticated and durable. The shell tempering and thin vessel walls became hallmarks of Mississippian ceramics, and these were all produced in professionally specialized workshops. Now, their architectural innovations are seen in the great structures and temples of the towns. Now, as for copper technology, excavations near Cahokia Mound 34 from 2002 to 2010 revealed a copper workshop. So far, it is unique at a Mississippian archaeological site. It contains the remains of 3 tree stumps used to hold anvil stones. Analysis of copper found during excavations shows that it had been annealed. Annealing is the repeated heating and cooling of a metal. Polished copper fragments examined microscopically for grain structures show the size, shape, and features. Hammering the copper with a heavy rock did the annealing, then putting the copper in the hot coals of a wood fire for 5 to 10 minutes to soften it, and then repeating the cycle until the coppersmiths had created a thin sheet of copper. And those of you who have seen Western movies know that this is the way iron was handled at the time of the Old West for the white people. They used copper knobs or copper rivets and other mechanical devices to secure sheets of copper together. Bending a copper sheet back and forth was the technique to cut copper. Now, trade. Cahokia was located in a strategic position near the confluence of the Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois rivers. It maintained trade links with communities as far away as the Great Lakes to the north and the Gulf Coast to the south, trading in copper, Mill Creek chert, and whelk shells. Mississippian pottery and stone tools were found at the Silver Nail site near Red Wing, Minnesota. Trade goods from Pennsylvania, the Gulf Coast, and Lake Superior are found at Cahokia. Now, comments on the settlement pattern. At the high point of its development, Cahokia was the largest urban center north of the great Mesoamerican cities. According to a 2007 study in Quaternary Science Reviews, between AD 1050 and 1100, Cahokia's population increased from between 2,800 people to 15,300 people. That's in 50 years, within less than a square mile of the central occupation area. Some archaeologists estimate its population overall as having been 40,000 at its peak. Now, the mass of working farmers lived in outlying farming villages. Recently, new residential areas were identified to the west of Cahokia because of archaeological survey and excavations, and this has increased population estimates. Cahokia was equal to or larger than the population of AD 1200's London. We know now that Cahokia was larger than any city in the United States until the 1780s, when Philadelphia's population grew beyond 40,000. The original site contained 120 earthen mounds over an area of 6 square miles, of which 80 remain today. To achieve that, thousands of workers over decades moved more than an estimated 55 million cubic feet of earth in woven baskets to create this network of mounds and community plazas. Monk's Mound, for example, covers 14 acres, rises 100 feet, and was topped by a massive 5,000 square foot building 50 feet high. Early in its history, Cahokia underwent a massive construction boom. Along with the early phase of Monk's Mound, an overarching urban layout was established at the site. It was built with symbolic quadripartite worldview, including an orientation toward the 4 cardinal directions, with the main east-west and north-south axes defined with the Monk's Mound near its center point. 4 large plazas were established to the east, west, north, and south of Monk's Mound. To the south of Monk's Mound is the Grand Plaza, a large area that covered roughly 50 acres and measured over 1,600 feet in length by over 900 feet in width. Soil studies have shown that the landscape was originally undulating ridge and swale topography. In one of the earliest large-scale construction projects, the site had been expertly and deliberately leveled and filled by the city's inhabitants. And part of the sophisticated engineering displayed throughout the site. It was used for large ceremonies and gatherings, as well as for ritual games such as chunky. That's Chunkey. Rolling a disc-shaped chunky stone across the field was the way to play chunky. The men would throw spears where they thought the chunky stone would land. The game required a great deal of judgment and aim. The major ceremonial north-south axis connects the main precinct with the large ridgetop mortuary mounds to its south, now known as the Rattlesnake Mound 66. The feature, named the Rattlesnake Causeway, is at an elevated embankment about 59 feet wide by 2,600 feet long. It varies in height from 1.6 feet to 4.3 feet as it traverses a low, swampy area to the south of the Grand Plaza. It is aligned 5 degrees east of north, a direction that mimics the maximum southern moonrise of 5 degrees west of north in reverse. This had symbolic associations to the builders by connecting them to their lunar maze goddess of the underworld. Its close proximity to the Ridgetop mortuary Mound 72 has the underworld connotation of the low, water-filled area the causeway traversed, and its terminus at the mortuary complex at the Rattlesnake Mound. The causeway itself was a symbolic path of souls. A 2-mile-long palisade that was equipped with protective bastions surrounded the ruling class central district of Cahokia. A later addition to the site, when the palisade was constructed, it cut through and separated some pre-existing neighborhoods. Archaeologists found evidence of the stockade with bastions during excavation of the area that showed several building phases. Beyond Monk's Mound are 120 more mounds and varying distances from the city center. To date, 109 mounds have been located, 68 of which are in the park area. The mounds are divided into 3 different types: platform, conical, and ridgetop. Each appeared to have had its own meaning and function. The city center was laid out in a diamond-shaped pattern about 1 mile from end to end. The entire city is 5 miles across from east to west. Monk's Mound is the largest structure and central focus of the city of Cahokia, a massive platform mound with 4 terraces, 10 stories tall. It is the largest man-made earthen mound north of Mexico. Facing south, it is 100 feet high, 951 feet long, 836 feet wide. It covers 13 acres, and it contains about 814,000 cubic yards of earth. The mound was built higher, taller, and wider over the course of several centuries, through 10 separate construction episodes, and the terraces and apron added over time. Excavation on the top of Monk's Mound has revealed a large building. It was a temple, and the residence of the paramount chief cum king. It would have been visible throughout the city. This building was about 105 feet long by 48 feet wide and 50 feet high. It had an interior of 5,000 square feet. Mound 72 is a small ridgetop mound located 2,790 feet to the south of Monk's Mound. Early in the ATC history of the site, it was a circle of 48 large wooden posts known as a wood hinge. The wood hinge was later dismantled, and a series of mortuary houses, platform mounds, mass burials, and eventually the ridgetop mound erected in its place. The mound was the location of the beaded burial. This was an elaborate burial of a person I think was one of the kings of Cahokia. It is accompanied by the graves of several hundred retainers and sacrificial victims, clear evidence that society is class divided and ruled by a state apparatus, that is, army and police, in the hands of the ruling class that has subjugated the rest of the society. During excavation of Mound 72, a ridgetop burial around a burial mound south of the main urban precinct, archaeologists found the remains of a man in his 40s, who I believe was a king. The man was buried on a bed of more than 20,000 marine shell disc beads arranged in the shape of a falcon. the bird's head appeared beneath and beside the king's head, and its wings and tail beneath his arms and legs. The falcon warrior is a common motif in Mississippian culture. In addition, a cache of sophisticated, finely worked arrowheads in a variety of different styles and materials was found near the grave. Separated into 4 types, each from a different geographic region, the arrowheads demonstrated Cahokia's extensive trade links in North America. Buried with the king were 250 sacrificial victims, including 4 young males missing their hands and skulls, a mass grave of more than 50 women around 21 years old, with the bodies arranged in 2 layers separated by matting, a mass burial containing 40 men and women who were violently killed, some buried alive, some had been trying to pull themselves out of the mass of bodies. Wood in several parts of the mound has been radiocarbon dated to between AD 950 and 1000. Mound 72 was not constructed as a series of smaller mounds reshaped and covered over to give Mound 72 its final ridge shape. Now, early in the history of Cahokia, the portion of the site containing Mound 72 and 96 was the location of the wood hedge, which I mentioned before, a ceremonial area that had 412 feet in diameter in a circle of 48 upright wooden posts. These posts date approximately AD 950. Now, archaeological research has shown that 4 of the posts were at the cardinal locations of north, south, east, and west. The eastern and western posts marking the positions of the equinox sunrise and sunsets. 4 other posts in the circle were shown to be at the summer solstice sunrise and sunset and the winter solstice sunrise and sunset positions. This setup is nearly identical to the diameter and post positions of wood hedge 3, one of the 5 successive wood hedges built in another location at Cahokia, differing only in that wood hedge 3 was 2 feet smaller in diameter. Now, the post holes were 3.3 feet in diameter. The placement of the 2 mounds at the location and the directions in which they were oriented correspond to several of the solstice marking posts. The post nearest the later king's burial is the location that marked the summer solstice sunrise at the times of the use of the site. The early stages of the mounds were constructed around the posts, although at a later point the posts were removed. Besides their celestial marking functions, the wood hedges also carried religious and ritual meaning that is reflected in their stylized depiction as a cross in a circle motif on ceremonial beakers connected with black drink ceremonies, and one prominent example has markers added to the winter sunrise and sunset position, and this is, of course, the ATC unifying religion. Now, Mound 72 is a ridgetop mound, one of the only 6 recorded at the Cahokia site. Unlike other ridgetop mounds, which are aligned eastward and north-south, as are most features at the large site, Mound 72 is aligned 30 degrees off the east-west line. This alignment is the same as the summer solstice, sunrise, winter solstice, sunset line for this latitude. Near the end of the late emergent Mississippian Edelhart phase, or the beginning of the early Mississippian Loman phase, that is AD 1000 to 1050, 2 small platform mounds were constructed around several of the wood hedge posts. One of them, the position marking the summer solstice sunrise positions, these mounds were expanded and eventually merged and covered over and then reshaped in the process into the final Mound 72 ridgetop mound. A few comments on ruling class burials. The beginnings of the mounds were interment of several elite personages oriented to the summer solstice sunrise post. This post is aligned with the north-south axis with a point on the southwest corner of Monk's Mound. The post had been replaced several times, including at least one episode after the beginning of mound construction. 16 feet west of the post was the burial of a tall man in his 40s who I think was a king. Now, the body was placed with his feet to the northwest on an elevated platform covered, as we have seen, by a bed of more than 20,000 marine shell disc beads. and these, as I've said before, were arranged in the shape of a falcon, with the bird's head appearing beneath and beside the man's head, and its wings and tail beneath his arms and legs. The king was buried with other retainers and elaborate grave goods, including mica and other exotic minerals, and copper sheaths thought to be remains of copper-covered chunky sticks, a cache of chunky stones, and hundreds of finely made arrowheads collected from throughout the Mississippian world. This is a typical type of royal burial we see in the other areas of origin of the slave stage. Now, interred in the mound were 2 recently deceased men and several bundled burials, probably the previous residents of the charnel house, who had waited for the king to die in order to be interred with him. Over this first phase, a 46 feet square platform with 2 levels and ramp on its eastern side was constructed. The next episode of construction at this location involved a pit being dug into the mound and a cache of various grave goods being deposited in it. A large rectangular pit was dug into the southeast corner of the mound, and a mass burial of 24 women was made in it. A new layer of fill was added to the mound and was extended to the southeast toward Mound 72 Sub 1 for a ramp or extension over the mass burial of 53 young women. All of these women were the same age, now more or less. Now, the next episode of construction involved 3 stages. A small platform was constructed near the southeastern ramp, and 4 young males with their arms interlocked and missing their hands and skulls were laid out on the platform. Some researchers have concluded that the 4 men may represent the 4 cardinal directions. And finally, we come to class war. In a pit excavated next to these 4 men were placed the bodies of a large group of young women. This mass grave contained the remains of 53 females ranging in age between 15 to 30 years of age, arranged in 2 layers separated by matting. The young women show evidence of having been strangled before being arranged in neat rows in the pit. Analysis of bones and dental traits of these women have led archaeologists to believe these individuals were not from the same social class and ethnic group as other individuals interred in the mound. These were sacrificial people who were either slaves or who were drafted and not volunteers. Non-metric dental traits have suggested that these individuals were not from Cahokia, and I think they were imported slaves. Analysis of specific carbon isotope and nitrogen isotope ratios left by maize consumption in the bones and cartilage of the women prove they consumed more maize and less animal protein than the ruling class individuals. Along with pathologies indicative of poor health and nutritional stress prove they were slaves rather than of ruling class origin. Now, the entire construction was then covered and extended even further toward Mound 72 Sub 1 and now labeled by archaeologists as Mound 72 Sub 3. Next to this mound, to the southwest, another mass burial was made. This burial is the most grisly found at the site so far, containing 39 men and women who were violently killed. Before the mass interment, a pit was dug and lined with white sand. The victims were then killed and thrown over the edge of the pit. These victims show signs of meeting a violent end, including several being incompletely decapitated, some with fractured skulls, others with fractured jawbones. Some of these individuals were buried alive. The chief investigator writes, "From the vertical position of some of the fingers which appear to have been digging in the sand, it is apparent that not all of the victims were dead when they were interred. Some had been trying to pull themselves out of the mass of bodies. There are arrowheads in the back of some of these victims. This evidence indicates that these were the losers of a rebellion against the rulers of Cahokia, perhaps objectors to the earlier sacrifices of the young women. On top of them were the remains of 15 ruling class individuals laid out among litters made from cedar poles and cane matting. Radiocarbon dating of the cedar poles used for the litters in the top layer burials in this pit determined that this burial was made approximately 100 years after the Woodhead Circle had been constructed, or approximately AD 1030. And then some comments on slave stage burial practice in general. Numerous secondary bundle burials of the bones of individuals previously stored in a charnel house were placed in the mound. After a few final intrusive burials into the southwestern edge, sub 3 and sub 1 were covered in a blanket of earth and given its distinctive ridgetop shape. All of the burials in the mound are located within an area circumscribed by the arc of the Woodhead Circle. 272 individuals were interred in Mound 72 in 6 separate episodes of burial over 100 years. This was the lineage of a prominent family, along with many retainers and sacrifices. 62% of the 272 people interred in the mound were sacrificial victims. A similar ritual human sacrifice of retainers and commoners upon the death of a ruling person is attested in the historical record among the Natchez, these being the last fully adherents to that religion in the southern U.S. Now, Mound 96 is a virtual mirror image of Mound 72, sub 1. It was another small, nearly square platform mound measuring approximately 49 feet wide at its base and a projecting ramp on its eastern side, giving it a T shape. It was built around the location of the winter sunset pole of the Woodhenge and oriented along the north-south and east-west alignment common at Cahokia, with the ramp facing the winter solstice sunrise pole. The ramp starts at 16 feet wide at its base, and it narrows to 1.6 feet wide at the top. Radiocarbon and ceramic seriation of sherds place its construction date in the Loman phase, AD 1000 to 1050. This is the same time as Mound 72. Both were finished with a hard cap of black clay. Investigating archaeologists believe its engineers used that cap as a protective layer to protect the mound from erosion. And I want to make the comment that in ancient China, where we have excellent recorded evidence, such burials characterize those of slave stage kings. Conversely, China's first emperor, as a legalist, that is the philosophy of feudalism, buried life-size people and horses of clay, rather than the bodies of slaves slaughtered for the sacrifice. So, with that comment, I'm going to conclude the series of lectures on the Eastern Woodlands. When you get your book, we're going to have some maps, and a lot of this will probably be easier to follow. And in the next lecture, we're going to move on to prehistoric California, and that will conclude it for today.